Hey, fellow YouTubers, Roland Martin here. Listen, I travel around the country, and one of the things I do a lot in the wintertime are I do a lot of seminar work. And probably there's about 3 or 4 questions people ask me in these different seminars. They say, number 1, what's the biggest fish you've ever caught? Number 2, what's your favorite lure? Number 3, what's your favorite lake? And so I answer them for the first question because that's probably the most prevalent. What's the biggest fish I've ever caught? And I answer them this. I say, the biggest fish I ever lost was 15 pounds and 3 ounces. And they say, well, we don't understand. What are you talking about? The biggest fish you ever lost. How do you know how big it was if you lost it? Well, let me tell you the story. The story was, years ago, I used to fish the Ocala Forest. That's Rodman Reservoir, that's Kerr Reservoir. I used to take we didn't have braid then. This is braid, and this is kind of a new shiner outfit now. Then we had the old 40-pound test monofilament. We had no braid, we had no fluorocarbon. And for hooks, I used to take hooks like this and wire like this, and I used to make my own weedless hooks. So this is the weedless hooks that I build. Let me just show you basically how I build them. And that says I take a piece of wire and I come through the eye of the hook like this and bend it like this and take my pliers, twist it a few times, take my pliers, keep twisting it. Anyway, I'm twisting it down tight. And now, the weedless is on there. Now I just have to bend it, and I bend all the little ends to it so that it's weedless. And I'd get the biggest shiners I could get. I'd get great big shiners, way big, and I couldn't even buy them. I had to go down to the Ocala forest and to the Ocklawaha River, and I had to take a cane pole and bread, and I had to catch these fish and keep them alive. Get up on Rodman Reservoir, for example, put big floats out, have big saltwater reels, have big heavy line like this, and we'd troll across all the logs and labyrinths of stumps and trees. And that's how we caught a lot of big fish. Now at the time, Scott hadn't been born. In fact, my first wife, Marianne, was pregnant with Scott. And she was kind of upset with me. She said, Roland, she says, you go out every day and you fish in those big shiners and you've caught a bunch of great big giant bass, and I haven't caught a big bass. I want you to have me catch a big giant bass. Can you take me out and catch me a big giant fish? I said, I think I can, maybe a big 10-pound fish. So we go up to Rodman Reservoir. We go get the little shiners in the river. We finally get them in the thing, and we get them up that day, and we get them on the edge of the Ocklawaha River, and there's a bunch of trees, great big trees that drops in about 20 feet of water. We tie up and we throw our floats out. Okay, we have these floats like this, and we have a big shiner on them. And this is a different hook now. This is a store-bought hook. And we throw the shiners out. Well, the shiners go every which way. So her shiner came over to this side, and my shiner came over to this side. So looking out there, her shiner's in front of me, and my shiner's in front of her. Okay, both of them got nervous. Some fish came by, so both of them went there. So there's a big swirl over here, big swirl over here. And I looked at the big swirl in front of her was on my rod. A great big giant swirl came out. And I said, Marianne, the rod on the right is this rod. This is the big fish. This is the one that you want to take. We'll take this rod right here. And she had the other rod, and that was where the little one hit, and she didn't realize they were crossed like that. She said, you're trying to trick me. You're going to trick me. I want to catch a big fish. So she went ahead and set the hook, and she had a little old bass on. And I said, okay. She said, go ahead and set the hook. They aren't that big. And I set the hook. I had a 10.5-pound bass. Well, that wasn't the big fish of the day. That was still, well, it was the big fish of the day so far, but that wasn't the end of the story. The end of the story was she's mad. She is so mad at me. She said, Roland, you've tricked me. You caught the big fish again, and now I haven't caught anything. You're just horrible. And she's really upset with me and stuff like that. So I said, well, let's keep fishing. Well, maybe you'll get another big one. I don't know what was going on. So she's all sulking, and she's sitting there all mad because I'd caught the big fish. And so I pulled on the river channel. There's a great big giant tree there, a real distinctive tree that I'd been keying all my directions around that one tree. And I tied up to it, took my floats and threw out there with the big shiner. And now, the shiner goes out, and it's way late in the evening, she's all mad, and she wants to go home. all of a sudden this big giant boil came up. I mean, this is a really big fish now. It really boiled up the water. It came up and took the shiner down and down into the logs. And I set the hook with the big rod, and I set the hook, and I had this big weedless hook and everything like that. And boy, it's down there, and it's all hung up. I'm looking down at the fish. It's clear water. This is the biggest bass I've ever seen in my life. I've never seen a bigger bass ever. Not then or not now. And so I'm looking at the water at this tremendously large bass, and I'm yelling, Marianne, hold on to that log, hold on to the log. It's wrapped around the log. I'm going to take my clothes off. I'm going to dive down. I've been doing that on occasion. I've done that at Santee, and I did that other times when they wrap up. I'd be shallow water. I'd have a knife. I was going to go down and cut the line, grab the great big bass, and, come up with it. A big trophy fish, the biggest one I've ever seen ever in my life. She said, no. She said, I'm not going to do that. She said, you tricked me before, and I don't care if you catch another big fish. It just doesn't make any difference to me. I'm not going to help. So now we're drifting in the wind, and I can't hold on. I'm trying to run the boat. I'm trying to hold the rod. I'm trying to grab the rod, and I can't do all this. It's just too much for me. And so I pull hard. I break the line. Line breaks. I'm saying, oh my heavens, this is just terrible. I've just broke the biggest fish I'll ever hook. I'll never hook a bigger fish in my entire life. I'm sick to my stomach. Marianne's not talking to me. I'm not talking to her. I go back to Salt Springs, and it's not far from Rodman Reservoir, and I pull into my good friend's tackle shop, and his name is Dennis Ron. Dennis Ron is a guide. And I said, Dennis, you have any guide trips coming up? He said, yeah, I got a big guide trip tomorrow with this fellow from Baltimore. I said, well, listen, Glenn, I'm working up on the lake with Glenn Lau and with Homer Circle, and we're doing some film work tomorrow, and I can't fish, but I'll tell you what, I had the biggest fish on I've ever caught in my life. I caught one 10.5 today, and that was pretty good, but that wasn't the key. The whole story was this other one that was half again as big. It was just gigantically big. And I said, it's by the big tree, on the corner. Yeah, I know which tree it is. Okay, it's right there. And that's where it is. Maybe it's on a spawning bed on the bank. I don't know what it is. Maybe he's there. So anyway, I go up the next morning, and I'm working with the guys with this film work. And we're doing some filming for the Fisherman series that Homer Circle was hosting at the time, and Glenn Lau was filming, and I was helping with. And this is 1975, early spring of 75. And so anyway, Marianne's back at the RV park, and I'm out with the guys fishing. So about 9 o'clock, I hear this yelling, and boy, here comes Dennis in his little boat, and he's flying across the lake. He flies up the river, and he pulls up to where we're fishing. He says, Roland. He says, I just caught the biggest bass I've ever seen in my life. I've never seen a bigger bass. It's just fantastically large. And so let's see it. He pulls up this bass. It's 15 pounds and 3 ounces. We weigh it. We got other scales, and it's the biggest thing. And it turns out to be the largest fish caught in the state of Florida in like 3 years. And nothing had topped it. This is the biggest fish that Dennis had ever seen and ever caught. Nobody had ever caught a bigger fish. So anyway, I'm saying that's a fantastically big fish. Where'd you catch it? He said, he caught it right off the big tree. Yeah, and then he reaches down and he says, is this your weedless hook? Now this is a weedless hook I built. This is the weedless hook. This isn't the exact one, but it's like it. It's a special wire that I twist around. It's a special hook. You don't buy a hook like this. This is a hook I built and made. He says, this your hook? I said, yeah, that's my weedless hook. And like a dummy, this was back before cell phones, and this was back before we had many cameras, and we didn't have the right camera. We didn't take a picture of the fish. And the irony of it all was this guide trip guide from Baltimore had never caught a bass over 5 pounds. And he wasn't really appreciative of the big fish. He didn't think it was a big deal. He says, well, I know I'd come down to Florida and catch a big fish, and so what? I don't even know if he even mounted it. But the point was, it would have been the biggest fish I'd ever caught in my life, period. It ended up being the biggest fish I ever lost, period. Well, that's my big fish story. I'll have other stories to come. And hey, listen, I appreciate you watching on TV and on the YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is really necessary for me because, television, it's kind of stable. It has some audience, and don't get me wrong, it's a bigger network. It's a bigger thing than YouTube, but it's not growing like YouTube's growing. And YouTube's really, the numbers are coming up. And so the more and more subscriptions that you give me, and you give me a lot of subscriptions. I got like 76,000 subscriptions now, and I'm growing, and my advertisers are happy. So every time you subscribe, hey, it's just a feather in my cap, and everybody's happy, I'm happy, the advertisers are happy, and I really appreciate you watching. I really appreciate doing these films too, and I'll have some more stories to come. I post every Wednesday about 6 o'clock. I post every Sunday about 6 o'clock, and I'll have some other good stuff coming your way. Thanks, and we'll see you soon.